Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial by Ayush Paper. I'm Kamya, an artist and art educator. I go by the handle Art by Kamya on most of the social media. Today in this tutorial we will learn to draw this simple still life painting of an anti-door knocker in watercolors. As paper matters to me, today I will be using this A4 size watercolor book by Ayush Papers. It has 270 GSM paper which is 100% cotton and totally acid free. This watercolor book comes in different sizes, so you can use this as a travel book as well. I will be using mainly 3 brushes, one big flat brush, one big round brush and one medium round brush. To start with, this is the very basic sketch which is required for this illustration. I'll start with a very light wash of the base color. In this case, I am using a very light tone of peacock blue watercolor. I am using my big flat brush here to cover the entire area in a wash of blue color. In this illustration, we have some areas which have the light, whereas some other areas have the shadows. So, we will be using the light tones of blue color to depict the light areas, and for the shadows, we will be using the deep tones of the same color. I am now using a deeper tone of blue color to depict the shadow on the wall on the left side of this illustration. I am using a wet on wet technique here so that the light and shadowed areas blend with each other naturally. If you don't have this tone of blue, you can use any analogous blue or a similar tone of blue. Once my paper is dry, I'll start with the detailing on the door knocker. I've now switched to my big round brush and I am again using a deep tone of the same blue color. I am using this deep tone of blue to paint the areas which are under the shadow. This will include the inner parts of the door knocker itself and the shadow of the door knocker being cast on the background. Now since the shadow of the knocker will have a perfect shape, so I will not be using a wet on wet technique, rather I'll be using a wet on dry technique to get that perfect shape. During my learning process, I often had some questions or I wanted to help around some of the art techniques or some new methods. So I just wished at times, that somebody could help me out or I could reach out to some of the experts who could answer my queries. Now, Ayush Paper has come up with a very superb platform, ask.ayushpaper.com, where you can reach out to different experts from different art mediums and ask your queries, and they would be happy to answer your queries and probably guide you on how to go about a particular technique or new art form. Do check out their website as well for some art related content, some amazing art blogs and some experiences and reviews about the amazing books from Ayush Paper. So do check out their website, ayushpaper.com. Now as you can see, I'm using a darker tone of blue to color the shadowed areas, particularly on the inner side of the ring or the right side of the ring, and the shadow of the ring being cast on the background, and some of the parts of the ring where it is attached to the background. So that all depicts, gives it a three-dimensional look. Now since we want to make the door a little antique, so let's add some rust to the door. So I'm here using burnt sienna to give that rustic look to the door. I'm using a thin round brush, number 6, and I am just splattering small dots around the surface of the ring, the knocker basically, and then I'm just grazing it with some water so that the burnt sienna just spreads around casually, and there's no specific shape you need to give. Just put some random splattering and dots around the edges and all around the knocker, and just glaze it with a very light wash of water so that there are no hard edges per se, and you get that rustic look on the door. So I've given the rustic effect on the knocker and the metal piece where it is attached to the knob. Now if you see the inner parts of the knocker, where the shadow is a little too dark, so to give yet another darker tone of shadows, I have mixed a little of Payne's Grey to the same blue to get this darkest tone for the shadows. This is to cast the darkest shadows, for example the shadow cast by the knocker on the background, the door, and the inner part of the knocker where the shadows are the darkest. So the shadows are not simply black, it always has the color of the object on which the shadow is being cast. So for example, here the shadow is being cast on a blue door, so all the shadows will have a tone of blue to them. To make a lighter shadow, we use a slightly higher tone of the same color, and for the darker shadows we can even add some colors like Payne's Grey for the shadow. Now the inner parts of the knocker, which will be really dark because they are just in the opposite direction of the sunlight, they are not facing the sunlight, so they will be extremely dark. So here I'm using Payne's Grey mixed with burnt sienna. So I'm using burnt sienna because the knocker is having a rustic effect, so that is why it's a little darker brown per se color. So if you don't have burnt sienna or Payne's Grey, you can use a dark brown color. I'm also adding the some spots of the same color on the entire knocker. This is to give a texture to the ring so that it gets a little natural effect, because at some places the rust might be very deep inside, and at some places it's on the surface. So just to get that natural effect, so I'm playing with the colors. So here's a darker tone of burnt sienna, you can say. The technique here is the same, so I just apply the dark tone of burnt sienna on the entire knocker, and then I just glaze it with a very light wash of water, so the colors blend naturally, and that's how I get the rustic effect. The reason I chose this illustration was because, first of all, the drawing is pretty simple. It's just a couple of circles there, so that we can focus more on how to capture the light and shadow effect, and not worry about the drawing or the sketching and the perspective. But as you learn more about still life, you can start off with complex structures and complex figures as well. So this tutorial is ideal for someone who's just starting with still life, because the drawing is not very complex and we are not using too many colors, just a couple of colors and a couple of brushes, and there are not many details to be added, so you can easily get that surrealism which you want to capture in still life. So as you go about, you can start, or you can further go on with complex subjects like food and other objects which are set up. And you can even check out my Instagram, because I do a lot of still life, so you can check out my works on my Instagram at Art by Kamya. So I just, still life is my forte basically, so I just love to do still life, and still life in watercolors is the best. I'm now adding some final touches on the background, the door probably where the knocker is attached, and adding some creaks and some cracks to give that antique look to the door. Again, I'm using the same colors, the blue, Payne's grey and burnt sienna, combination of that, and just giving some cracks. So I hope that you found this tutorial quite helpful in terms of still life. We would love to see your recreation, or if you create anything inspired from this artwork, please tag us or DM us on Instagram with Ayush Paper. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and check out our website ayushpaper.com. Thank you.